name is Kraig Brown. I am the Partnerships and Development Manager at Digital Xtra Fund. I have been managing the fund since it became a charity back in 2017. It was actually created in 2016 by Skills Development Scotland and Scotland Is, but in 2017 we became an independent charity, and we have ran 5 funding cycles since then, supporting almost 140 projects. This will be our 6th as an independent charity and 8th overall. So if you're not familiar with Digital Xtra Fund, which I'm hoping you are if you're joining this call, but very, very briefly, we are a Scottish grant awarding charity that works with industry and government to support extracurricular activities that engage young people in digital tech. Specifically, we are looking to engage young people around the skills of coding, robotics, computational thinking, data science, cyber skills, more so than sort of the digital literacy and the digital media side of things, which is important, but it's not what we as a charity focus on. So if you would like more information about the charity or what we do, you can pop onto our website and have a look, but I don't want to focus too much on that because there's, as Maha said, there's a lot to get through. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to actually share my screen for most of the call. I'm going to go through an application that I have written already. It's not a super in-depth application for 2 reasons. One, it does take quite a bit of time to do this application, so hopefully you've been thinking about it already. And 2, we try not to be too prescriptive, because one of the great things about Digital Xtra Fund is the variety of ideas that we get and the variety of organizations that apply. And I don't want to try and say what you should or shouldn't do too much. This call's more about giving you sort of guidelines as to what to watch out for, or explain the evaluation process as well. So actually, I think that's where I'll start, is the evaluation process. So you go into our website, and I'll show you this all in a minute. We do ask that, if possible, you complete the application online. If that's not something that is possible, there is an offline version that you can download and email in. Even if you do complete it online, I would suggest completing it offline first using the Word document, so that if something does go wrong with your browser or your Wi-Fi goes down or whatever, you don't lose the work you've already put into it. We receive that file, and on the 6th of April, applications close. We then have a panel that we're putting together at the moment that's made up of industry and education and skills representatives. Each application is read independently by 3 different panelists, and they score it independently. And then we come together in May. We'll compare notes, or they'll compare notes, I should say, because Maha and myself, we organize the panel, but we don't take part in it. They have an opportunity to change their scores, but they don't have to come to consensus per se. And then we add all the scores together, and that's how we score the application. All of this is in the guidelines, so I would suggest you refer to there if you have any questions. But very briefly, what we ask the panel to do is to read each question. Each question is scored between 0 and 4. 0 basically being you have not answered the question, or it's not answered, and it's not answered the question itself. 4 being sort of the best possible answer. What we ask each panelist to do is go into a question with 2 being sort of an average score, and you've answered the question, but perhaps not given a great amount of detail, or maybe there's some additional items that you could have included that would have made the question better. And they sort of go from there. So if they feel that if it was a below average question, it would be a 0 or 1. If it was above average question, it would be a 3 or a 4. The only question that's different for that is the budget, which is actually just scored at a 0 to 2. 1 being you've answered it, but maybe there's some details missing. 2 being the budget's perfect, and 0 being you've not given enough details. So, and that's because the budget tends to be a very black and white type of answer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into the website, and you will see, if you haven't already, this is our website. And it is, I'm just going to expand my window here so I can see what I'm doing. Thank you. So if you haven't been to it, it's digitalxtrafund.scot. It's extra spelled with an X, and it's .scot, not .co.uk or .com or .org. You can see it there up in the top. If you click on the little apply button in the tab at the top, it'll give you some chat about what we as a charity are looking to achieve in general. But if you want to get to the actual page that is relevant to this funding round, it's right here. You click on that, and that will take you to the round 8 23-24 grant award documents page. And there's loads of stuff in here that you can look at. As Maha said, this is our final information webinar. We already had some in-person ones. There's what's probably the most useful is some impact reports here, some videos from Southmere Primary School, who's a previous grant recipient. We've got some information from Coder Dojo and Skills Development Scotland. You can find a list of all previous grant recipients on our website. And then here at the bottom is the actual application process. So we've got the link here to which is where you fill it in online. Then we've got some guidelines, which, like I said, I do encourage you to read those. We've got the offline document, which you can use, a sample project plan and a sample budget, which is very, very useful. And we have some examples of the evaluation forms that were used this year. It might not be the exact same form that we use for next year, but it will be similar enough that if you read it, you'll get an idea of what we're looking for. So if you click on this, you will actually open up a new window, which I've already got here, and it will take you to the actual online form. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this, but basically you need to answer yes to all of these, but obviously only answer yes if that is the true answer. Because if any of these are no for you, then you may not be applicable. You may not be able to apply. And I would, again, go back to the guidelines just to make sure that you do. But basically, if you're engaging young people aged 16 and under with an extracurricular activity in Scotland, and you are a registered charity, registered company, chartered body, local authority, school, college, university, basically anyone who's not a sort of volunteer off the street or sole trader, then you can apply. So if we go to the next button there at the bottom, so this will be just sort of, like I say, top level details. I've given my name, Extra Coding Club. It's just made up. I've made all these up. I've got our charity number in here and contact details, our social media handles. And then if you are the main applicant, which is what that top section is, that means you're basically responsible for A, the funding, and B, driving the project forward. But if you are working with any other organizations, like say other schools in your cluster, or if you're a third-party organization working with a library, or an organization here, so I've put Thomas in here as a third-party organization that we at Digital Xtra Fund are going to work with on this project. Obviously, I've not put Thomas's real contact details in there, but you can go to their website and learn more about their project. I think Thomas will talk a little bit more about what they do in a minute as well, but that's where you put it there. Now, later on in my application, actually, I just realized that I said we were going to use we were going to run a code club at a local library in Glasgow. Again, just made that up. I should have put that library in here under the activity partner, for example. So that's something that I missed there, and I should have put that in. If you've received a previous grant, you want to put a quick summary in there. It doesn't matter. The only part of it that matters is we don't fund like for like, so you can't apply for the exact same project again. What you can do is you can apply for an evolution or an expansion of a previous project, or you can apply for a brand new project. Thomas with Young Engineers and Science Clubs, actually, they have been awarded a Digital Xtra Fund grant more than any other school or organization in the history of the charity. So we, if you're talking about an organization that has been quite successful at applying, Young Engineers and Science Clubs is definitely one of those. And they have an amazing range of projects that they are looking to deliver across the country. So like I say, maybe check out their website. Once you do all that, you can click next. And that should take you to the first question, which is project summary. Now, this is arguably the most important question. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the hardest, but it is arguably the most important, because that panel of people made from industry and the education and skills sector will likely have no idea who you are or what your school does. They likely will have no idea what you may have done in the past or what you are planning to do. They might not even have a good idea of the curriculum, let's say, if you're a school. Obviously, this is extracurricular activity, so it doesn't have to be aligned to the curriculum. But if you're using words like E's and O's or CFE, or acronyms, I should say, or even words like Curriculum for Excellence, they might not know what those are. So you really want to try and encapsulate what it is you're looking to achieve here, but you want to do it in such a way that someone who has no familiarity with who you are or what you do will understand it. And the test, if I use that word, if I can use that word, the test that I always suggest you do is get someone who has no knowledge of tech and no knowledge of education, and get them to read your answer. And if they understand what you're trying to do, then you've probably answered that correctly in a way that the people on the panel will understand it as well. So that's the test, if you will, for that question. Question 2 is your school or organization summary. So you don't want to, in that first question, go on and on about your school and what they've done in the past or why they're well placed to deliver it. The first question is really about the activity. What will the young people be doing? What will they be learning? How often will they meet? Is it once a week? Are you planning to run a year-long club with the same 20 to 30 children, or are you running multiple cohorts with different children each time? Is it a lunchtime or after school club? Those are the types of details you want in that first question. And this one, you're much more talking about your school or organization and maybe what they've achieved in the past, feedback they've received in the past, why you are well placed to deliver the activity that you described in question 1. And then part B of that question is who are the people involved? So obviously I put myself in there. I've stuck Maha in there. Surprise. She doesn't know I did that. I stuck Thomas in there because he's our activity partner, and I put Jane Smith, who's the head librarian at this fake Glasgow library that I'm going to deliver our code club at, in there. And obviously I've put core skills and experience and qualifications, but you'd want to put real ones in there. You want to make sure that any activity partners that you've outlined on that first page are reflected in here as well, and vice versa. And that's where I was saying in that first page, I forgot to put the library as an activity partner, and in retrospect, I should have done that. So that's question 2. And apologies if I'm going quickly, but I'm just aware of the time, and these questions should be fairly straightforward. So hopefully there isn't too many questions about them. This is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated. And I'm going to ask Thomas to put on his thinking hat, because when I'm done describing this question here, I'm going to get him to tell us a little bit more about what they do at Young Engineers and Science Clubs to answer this question. This is the project plan. And if you've never created a project plan, it could be quite intimidating. Really, probably the best way to think about this for me, and again, maybe Thomas will have a different tip or trick, but for me, I like to think of this as a calendar. And in fact, that's what I do. I wrote this today. It's very, very, very basic, but I did write it. Just open my calendar on my computer. In my fictional coding club, we're going to meet every Friday. We're going to run four cohorts of 6 weeks each with around 20 young people. Obviously, before you even meet a person, so you can see here the 21st of September 2023, that's my cohort 1, week 1, intro to coding with Sphero Indies. But obviously there's stuff that has to happen before you even do that. We talk about that up here: planning, including procurement, training, delivery, industry engagement, evaluations. These are all milestones or deliverables or activities that we would like to see reflected in the project plan. So I've got here planning. So nothing. I'm not going to do anything in July. I'm away on holiday in July. That's fine. So I just put not applicable. But from the 1st of August, we're going to sit down and we're going to really confirm activities. Now, obviously, I have to have a top level plan because that's what the whole point of this is. But we're really going to nail down the activities that we're going to be doing with the young people, and specifically also the devices that we're going to need. And, again, that's something I probably already had to do a little bit of because I have to do a budget next. But, where are we going to buy them from, or are we going to confirm where we're going to buy them from? Or if you're a council or a school and you need to go through your procurement team, that is probably where we see the most sort of hiccups in terms of procurement. Is it takes schools and councils, maybe libraries and stuff, a little bit longer to procure equipment than sort of private organizations who can just sort of willy-nilly buy off Amazon or whatever. So if that's you want to make sure that you allocate yourself enough time for that in this place. Training, so any training in advance with staff or with whomever, you'll obviously want to put time in for that. The more training or the more staff, the longer it always takes to find the right date. But then basically what I just did is I just created a 6-week program, very, very top level. As you can see here, intro to coding with Sphero Indies. You can use any equipment. I've used equipment that's very, very popular with a lot of grant recipients. So you can see I've got Indies, Microbits, Marty the Robot, Vexgo, Lego Spike Essential. but you don't have to use these. Indies are a nice screenless introduction to coding. Microbits are a really simple, versatile device to learn block coding. And then we get into a bit more detail with some of these more hands-on stuff. It doesn't even have to be hands-on physical computing. Could be on-screen coding using Make Code Arcade or just Scratch. So, it doesn't have to be this, but this is just something I came up with in my head this afternoon. I've got evaluation in there because obviously it's always good to reflect back on what you've done and how to improve that. And there's a question on that later on. Update activities and provide additional training if required. Now you can see here there's only 1 week in July, and there's 2 weeks here, there's 3 weeks here, I've got 4 here. So these little buttons on the side, if you haven't already figured that out, you can add a line or subtract a line, and it's broken down by month. If, like I say, for July, there's nothing, that's fine, but you do have to put something in there. I've put NA, not applicable, just because you have to put something in there in order to advance the screen. But you can add as many or as few. I think you can have up to 500 deliverables, which if you have that many, great. And then I've just repeated that. So you can see here, cohort 2, week 1, cohort 1. Oh, I made a mistake there. Cohort 2, week 2, cohort 3. So I just repeated it. And that's fine. I'm going to do this. I didn't do it because I didn't want to just sit here and type all day. But I'm just going to, if I was doing this for real, I would just repeat that 2 more times after Christmas. I would do one in the winter and one in the spring, maybe. And then at the end, I've put it, some time in there for final evaluation. If you needed to do any final training or whatever, put that in there. But and then at the bottom here, there's the main risk. I've said that this is a new club, so a lack of initial participation is the largest risk. Working with YESC and the local library and local schools, we're going to identify individuals who would really benefit and enjoy this experience to build a strong first cohort, and then we're going to build on that. There is no right or wrong answer for that. This really is one of those sort of, we just kind of want to see what you say about that. So just have a think and put in there what you think. Now, Thomas, everything I've just said there is based on sort of experience, but we come from 2 very different sides of the coin. I'm a grant funder and I read a lot of applications. You're on the coalface, you're out there, you're engaging educators, you're engaging young people. How do you do something like this when you're filling in an application?
Yeah, I mean, I think your explanation for it is pretty comprehensive, to be honest. I mean, our model is typically a bit different. So when we find out we've got funding, our aim is basically to develop kind of a project, typically over summer. We recruit schools in a local authority, say 10, 15 schools, however many schools it is, and then we'll sort of launch that project to the schools. We'll provide them with training, the kits, and then sort of support them throughout the academic year. So we sort of start with dates in the school year that we kind of want the project to be up and running by. So that would typically be the first dates that we sort of put in. Say it's September, we want this project launched in September. And then we just think about all the things that we need to allow for to enable that to happen. So if we want to deliver a training date in September, well, that means we need to have the kits ready and packed, late August. It means we need to have the teachers recruited at least a month or 2 before that. To recruit the teachers, we need to have the project developed so that we allow ourselves a month for that. So we sort of start with when we want to kind of deliver something and then sort of work back. So in Kraig's example, if you were running a sort of coding, it would work really well that you sort of start with what week you want to start delivering your club and then sort of work back. We've also just come through a period of really difficult kind of procurement. So buying stuff, things being out of stock has been a bit of a challenge in the last couple of years. So we always allow ourselves longer with that time to get the materials, to play around with them, wait for them to get into stock and then sort of get the kits ready. And then, just kind of work our way through the year, I think.
I think that's a really good point, a really good strategy. I think I mentioned it sort of a bit with procurement, that especially when it's not a private organization, if it's council run, procurement tends to take longer than people expect. I think one of the common mistakes, I guess, that a lot of people make is, as you say, they want to get in front of the young people as quickly as possible and don't leave themselves enough time to get ready beforehand. Especially if you work your way backwards, you might realize that. It's not uncommon, let's say. That a coding club especially a new coding club at a new location might not, if you're again looking at it from an academic year point of view, might not get started till after the October break. I appreciate, young engineers and science clubs is not a school, but they work with a lot of schools. Those first 2 months can be quite hectic, and if you're trying to do all sorts of training and procurement in that time, if you then set yourself a deadline of, I've put myself here, what did I put? I put the 21st of September. It's actually not bad, but if you were thinking September 1st we're going to hit the ground running, you're just putting undue stress on yourself. And we, as a grant funder, we don't expect you to engage dozens of people necessarily a year, or certainly not even hundreds. We really want to make sure that it's more about quality over quantity. So that means you run 3 8-week cohorts over the year, and that first cohort doesn't start till after October instead of 4 6-week cohorts. Or you just do one cohort the whole year with the same 20 young people, but you don't start it till after October or whatever. That was my danger with filling this in with too much details. I didn't want to be too prescriptive, and for people on the call here or watching this on YouTube to think, oh, we need to do it this way. That's not it. We have all sorts of projects, and again, this is where looking at what we've supported in the past, maybe looking at what else has been supported in your local authority and contacting them might be helpful, because there's no right or wrong way to necessarily do this. I think for us, we just want to make sure that the engagement is of a high quality, and as Thomas said, working backwards is a good way to do that. So yeah, Thomas, anything else that you wanted to add, or will I move forward on that?
I guess we're going to touch on the project plan a little bit later.
No, I think we'll talk a little bit maybe about the budget and the
Yeah.
industry engagement, but I think if you don't have anything, I think I'll move forward then.
No, I think it's just, for us, it was just with the project, it's just throwing down everything we think that we need to be involved, that might need to be involved. Reaching out to different people, all that takes time. So it's just not rushing into it.
Yeah, sitting down and having like a brainstorming session about everything that you say, like, and we've tried to touch on it at the top. Like I said, there's evaluation, procurement, planning, training, as well as delivery, getting that all up on a whiteboard or whatever, and then trying to fit it into a calendar or into this format. If you just try and sit here on the screen and type it in, you'll probably get frustrated. So the next screen, the next question I should say, there's budget. Now, this should be straightforward, but every year we do find that people do struggle with it a bit. We have changed it a little bit this year in hopes of trying to simplify it, and we do have a sample budget available on our website now as well, which you can look at. But essentially, you need to think of everything that you need, both in terms of physical devices, or in terms of admin, delivery, marketing, and print. If you're an organization that already owns a lot of equipment, your costs for delivery will probably be a lot higher than your cost for new equipment. Again, this is just what I've done here, but this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to buy equipment as your main thing. You can put the most of your resources into admin and delivery if that's what your model needs. This is a lot of kit for a code club. I think probably the majority, and I'm just trying to do this so that you don't think I'm promoting one particular piece of kit over another. I think the majority of our grant recipients will tend to focus on 1 to 3 activities / devices per year. I know Thomas, with the activities that we've supported over the years, tends to focus mostly on microbits and microbit accessories, which is fantastic. Especially now that schools all should have at least 20. And if you're not a school, they are an inexpensive device. They're only about £15 a pop. So great device to start on a not too expensive. If you want to start up a Lego club, for example, I mean, Lego's got a great name behind it. You just say Lego to kids, and they want to learn more about it, but you are going to pay a premium. So you have to sort of decide what's best for you. But I've sort of thrown everything in the kitchen sink at this budget. just and I've got, you know, Sphero Indies 5, Lego Spike Essential 2, Vex Go 2, Marty the Robot 2, microbits, 20 microbits, but don't forget batteries. You need batteries for microbit. Probably I should have put a battery charger in here as well. Like I said, admin, you know, 40 hours of admin for, you know, 24 hours of delivery. Quite possibly, you know, that might be the case. You've obviously got to get everything ready beforehand. You've got to prepare the lessons, as Thomas said, beforehand. So maybe your admin is going to be more than your delivery. Marketing and print, you know, I've only put £72 in there. That's not a lot. So, but again, I don't want to be too prescriptive. You just need to kind of figure out what's right for you. And if you need to cut a device in order to increase your marketing and budget, then you got to make that decision. Alternatively, you don't, so you can apply for up to £5,000, but you don't have to limit yourself to £5,000 if you have other areas that you can get support. So if you've applied to Tesco or Asda and the little chips and you've won, I think you get up to £500 or something. If your parents association is in a position to donate some funding, you can your budget can be more than £5,000, but obviously then you need to indicate here where the additional funding is going to come from. So, you know, I've said guest speakers will be volunteers providing their time free of charge, and the library already owns enough laptops for up to 20 learners per cohort. Obviously, if your school organization doesn't have enough tablets or laptops, that probably is going to have to be your first priority. And we do have grants that are focused entirely on laptops or tablets or Chromebooks to deliver it, because they just don't have that. This is a little bit of maths here. So basically, I would have loved for this to add it up on its own, but it doesn't. So if I put a 0 there, you'll see here that outstanding project costs is 4,500. This number is which was actually calculated from this number here. That's actually pulled from that first page. So make sure that, you know, if you haven't indicated the correct amount that you need on that first page, you might have to go back and correct it. But on that very first page where it said, how much are you looking for? I put 4,500. My budget, I then have to add that up manually. So make sure that it's correct. And if you add those numbers up, it actually does come to 4,500. I triple checked it. And you'll see that the outstanding project costs are 0. If this is only say 4,250, you'll see that there's £250 that you've asked for that is not been allocated to something. And unfortunately, we can't give you money for something unless it is for something. We can't give you money for nothing. So make sure that everything in your budget adds up to what you're looking for, which is 4,500. But like I said, if you need 500, if your budget is 5,000, you'll see here that's a minus, and that's where you need to say down here the parents association is going to donate £500 to cover the additional. My spelling is terrible. There you go. So so that's the budget explained, and this is where we've simplified it. We used to have to ask for calculations around additional funding and stuff. We've taken that all out, but basically you just ideally want this to either be 0 or a negative, and if it's a negative, you need to explain where the additional costs are coming from. So you can see here we've got the items that you need here, the unit costs, the number of them that you're going to have, and then a total cost. So this multiplied by this should equal this. That should be pretty straightforward. Make sure I did that correctly. I did. Good. Cool. The project plan and the budget are probably the 2 of the 3 questions that trip up the most people. So I'm going to pause here for a second, Maha, and I'm going to open it up. And if anybody has any questions, jump on your mic now, or if you're not comfortable with that or unable to do that, pop it into the chat. I'm just going to pause for a second, and I can answer any questions up until that point.
Yeah, Kraig, I was also going to say that in the grant guidelines, we do mention what we do fund and what can be included as part of the budget. So maybe it's worth looking that up as well, just in case you're not sure what could and couldn't be included.
That's an excellent point. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I can't see any questions.
So
So-
either everyone's fallen asleep or I've answered it really well. I don't want to know which, but I'm going to click next.
Can I just ask a quick question there?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not a school and I'm not an organization either. I'm just an individual that, and I currently run a co-club in a school. Am I eligible to apply for this, or would I need to apply via the school?
You would need to apply via the school.
Okay.
You would be listed as one of the key personnel.
Yeah.
If you charge for you said volunteer, but if you charge for your time, then they would need to include your fee in the budget, for example.
Yeah.
But like I said, I know you said you're a volunteer. But yeah, they ultimately would be responsible for the funding.
Yeah.
Where that might be a bit of a challenge, a trick, might be a bit tricky for you is because they're responsible for the funding, it then needs to go through their procurement channels, going back to all that stuff I said about procurement earlier. So, but yeah, and they'd also need to, they'd be responsible for the insurance and all that stuff, if required. So,
okay, cool.
Sorry, so I see a couple questions there now. How you mentioned earlier that each question is graded 0 to 4, actually, but yeah, do we receive feedback on our proposals for future reference? If you ask for that feedback, then we can provide it. It is anonymous in that you won't know who provided it, but we will copy and paste what the feedback that they provided. We don't provide scores, but we do provide the feedback. But it's because we had 94 applications last year, and we probably are going to have more this year. We tend not to do it unless it's requested. Can staff training to deliver a coding club be included in the application? Excellent question, and I should have referenced that earlier because it is a common question as well. Yes, training can be included. However, the training has to be directly related to the extracurricular activity. So if you're doing general training on digital tech, no, that would not be included. But if you're doing training on microbits and it's a microbit based activity, or you're doing training on Lego Spike Essential and it's a Lego Spike Essential or whatever, then you can include the training. Now, obviously, ideally that training will be able to be used in other contexts and in other places, and that's great. But anything that's declared in the budget has to be directly related to the activity itself. How do you include transport costs? You can apply for transport costs. There's different kinds of transport costs that you might be referring to there. So, for example, if it's for a trip to the local museum or a local university or a local employer to do like an offsite visit, yes, absolutely, we can do bus cost for a trip like that. If it's a cost to get someone to come to the school as a guest speaker, you would hope they might volunteer their time, but yes, you can pay for their transport and declare that, for example. If you're a rural area, for example, or even maybe not in a rural area, but if it's transport cost to get the kids home after every single club, that will be quite a high cost. And there is a line in the application that says, or in the feedback that we say, we do judge it on value for money. And if the majority of your cost is going to get your kids home, your learners home after every single session, especially over, say, 24 sessions or whatever, if that might not be considered value for money. You might have to look at an alternative way to deliver it, such as maybe a lunchtime club or online, to allow you to engage those learners that may be unfortunately not able to stay after school. Out of the 94 applications last year, how many were successful? 35. 35 were successful last year. If I'm completely honest with you, I don't know if we'll be able to fund 35 this year. We are, it is challenging in charity sector right now with the recession or the downturn in the economy, but there is at least going to be 20 supported, and we are aiming for 30. But if we get more than 94 applications, then, unfortunately, is what it is. We only have so much money each year. How many successful grants do you approve each round of applications? I think I just mentioned that, it's a matter of how much funding is available. And at the moment, we have at least 20 absolutely in the bank. We do have some additional funding that we're hoping to confirm between now and the end of May, which will allow us to support at least another 10. And if you're applying for microbits, for example, can you also put in netbooks to use them within the budget? Yes, absolutely. You can use Chromebooks or laptops or desktops or whatever you need to code the microbit. Obviously, you only have, like I said, the budget is what the budget is. It's £5,000. So if the majority of your budget is going to laptops, that's fine. But obviously, you want to make sure that you address that in the project plan by not planning to do things that you don't have equipment for. I know that seems daft, but we do have people who sometimes do that. And I think that's it for the questions. So question 5 is core objective. And this is where I sort of went off my prescriptive fake activity and just started putting stuff in because this question in particular is very much up to yourself how you want to answer it. This is a very open-ended, there is no right or wrong question. The core objective is to inspire young people to learn digital technology skills through high quality, exciting extracurricular activities, thus expanding the talent pipeline of young people who study technology-related disciplines and ultimately pursue a career in digital technologies. It just rolls off the tongue, really. So, it's up to you to say how your activity will address that, will achieve that. And if you've filled in this application before, you'll realize that there was a question before that asked about secondary objectives, and there are several secondary objectives listed in the guidelines. Instead of having a question specifically about those this time, what we've done is we've incorporated those into other questions. So number 6 is targets and outcomes. So this is, again, going back to that 0 to 4 grading, where 2 is average, and we ask every evaluator to go in with a 2 to each question and then move from there versus, starting at a 0 and working your way up. The first part of this question is very much black and white. How many young people are you going to engage by local authority? So with my fake code club, I'm going to engage 80 young people in Glasgow. And it said there's a question here, and this is something like Thomas, for example. Could the proposed initiative be delivered by the main applicant in a different local authority than those outlined above? An organization like Young Engineers and Science Clubs deliver across Scotland, so absolutely they could deliver in another local authority. Whereas if you're a school, obviously you're not really going to go and deliver in another local authority. You're probably not even going to go and deliver in another town or village. You're going to want to deliver in your own. So, you just hit no there, and that doesn't affect your score. That is more just if we have a lot of applications for Glasgow, for example, we might approach someone like Young Engineers and Science Clubs and say, you applied for Glasgow, but actually we've got about 4 grants already going to Glasgow. Could you deliver the same thing in Falkirk or whatever? And we have done that in the past with some organizations. So that's more for us than for yourself. You have to break down that 80 young people by age. So we're going to have 60 young people in ages 9 to 12, which is around P5 to P7. But we're going to run one cohort for younger ages, and we're going to focus more on introduction to computing. So again, I'm just making this up, but that's why that's broken down 60-20. And then gender, we're going to have, for 3 of the 4 cohorts, we're going to have a 50-50 gender balance. But for the 4th cohort, we're going to be all girls. So if you do the maths on that, 62.5% will be female, and 37.5% will be male. I don't know how I'm going to do 0.5%, but anyway, yeah. And I don't have any other, or prefer not to say. So, I think what's also important to realize is that whether it's the project plan or the targets and outcomes, we're not going to hold that over your head and say, you're not doing this. Maha's job is not to police you as a grant recipient. Maha's job is to support you. And if something is going wrong or something is not going to plan, we would much rather you communicate that to us, and maybe we might be able to help you, or we would want to adjust the project plan. It happens all the time. Thomas, I think back to the grant that you guys received just before COVID, and then everything went to pot. And your whole project during COVID changed because you just were not able to deliver to that. And so, you came at the time, Maha wasn't with Digital Xtra Fund yet, but you came to me, we sat down and we figured out what could we use the grant for instead, and we came up with a new project based on some activities that you had delivered before, and it worked well. And I'm chuffed to say that for the vast majority of projects during COVID, that in fact we only had one that was canceled. So that's what we're not here to hold these over to you. The purpose of these details, the project plan and the targets and outcomes, is more to ensure that you as a person delivering these activities have thought about it. Because that's key to your success, is that you've thought about it beforehand, not that you are constantly aiming to achieve something that might not be achievable. So if I go back to that 0 to 4, if you answer all those questions above, you'll get a 2. Simple. If you then talk about some of these audiences that are of a higher priority for Digital Xtra Fund, specifically areas of high deprivation, areas of rural isolation, or groups underrepresented in the digital tech sector, that's how you're going to get a 3 or a 4 for this particular question. So for me, one cohort is going to be specifically earmarked for young people from deciles 1 and 2. For example, again, I'm making this up. And that's how we are going to proactively target areas of high deprivation. We will also work with schools and other community groups in the area to identify individuals for the other cohorts who may be not getting the opportunities as some of their peers, and we're going to ensure that we try and give them a place before we open it up to the wider community. So just an answer that I have seen before that I felt was a good answer. I'm not an evaluator though, so don't say, well, Kraig said. Are we going to target remote rural areas? No, we're not. We're in the middle of Glasgow. So I've clicked no there. Are we going to proactively target groups underrepresented in the digital tech sector? Like I said earlier, one whole cohort is going to be girls only, and we're going to aim for 50-50 gender split in the other ones. There's a whole video on our YouTube page about tips and tricks on how to engage more girls in tech. Feel free to check that out. There's also a couple of resources, one published by Coder Dojo and one published by Skills Development Scotland, which you can also check out on our website. Keep in mind, groups underrepresented in tech don't just mean girls and young women as well. There's lots of groups, neurodiverse individuals, or Black and minority ethnic individuals that would also be groups underrepresented in tech as well. Definitions for those 3 audiences are in the guidelines, by the way. So engagement. This doesn't mean marketing. This means how are you going to get young people to come to your club and continue attending at your club. And again, I don't want to be too prescriptive here, but basically there is a challenge with getting young people engaged with technology. It's not easy. The gentleman who spoke earlier is already doing it. I'm sure he can attest to that. There are certain individuals who naturally may be drawn to tech, but it's all those others who aren't that we really want to also try and get involved. So that this question is how do we how are you going to achieve that? And then sort of building on that, and this is one of the secondary objectives, how will we dispel negative perceptions and stereotypes around digital tech and careers in tech? And again, there's no right or wrong answer for this, but different strategies that you might employ, such as guest speakers, offsite visits, case studies, applying real life context to the skills being learned. Specifically guest speakers, the saying is you have to see it to be it. And I'll quote Scotland Women in Technology, who's one of our partners as well, that we don't just need women in tech leadership roles to speak in front of girls and young women, but we need them to speak in front of boys and young men as well, so that they appreciate that that it normalizes the idea that there's tech leaders could be women as well. We can name. I bet you can speak to any kid, they could name half a dozen male tech leaders, but they would struggle to name a female tech leader. And so we need to show them that is absolutely something that should be rectified. I'm going to skip to number 8 because I believe this is the next part that I want to chat with Thomas about. But I'm going to say my little bit first. So contextualizing skills, we've broken this down between digital skills and meta skills. You could call them technical skills as well if you don't want to call them digital skills. But this is very much more sort of the digital, the coding, Python, block coding, data analysis, cyber skills, how they're going to apply those skills to the real world, or are you going to use project-based learning, or again, no right or wrong answer, but just what are the technical skills that the young people will be learning? I appreciate that if you're talking about younger children, they might not have as much detail, and that's fine. But any detail that you can provide obviously would be great. The next one is meta skills. And if you're not familiar with that term, it's probably more well known as, say, soft skills. But I would Google Skills 4.0, a skills model to drive Scotland's future. It's a few years old now, but it was a paper published by Skills Development Scotland, all about meta skills. It includes things like communication, collaboration, curiosity, creativity, resilience, focus, innovation. And we really, I think one of the main things that we forget as people who are delivering these activities is that those skills are just as important, particularly to employers, as computational skills. The reality is Scratch is not applicable to the real world. Really, you're not going to use Scratch to get a job, unless it's like a really cool job, of playing with kids all day. But the skills that they're going to learn when using Scratch, resilience, computational thinking, curiosity, collaboration, like I say, working as a team, those are actually what the employers are looking for. So we've broken this down this year into 2 bits. And we're just asking for people to provide examples on how they'll learn those and examples of what they'll learn. And then 8B is, like I say, there was 3 questions that probably trip people up a little bit in this application: the project plan, the budget, and this one, engaging industry. So we really want to try and provide real world context to the skills being learned. That is a big part of what we as a charity are aiming to do. We really would like to see industry involved in that process, although we appreciate that isn't always possible. Although if there's one silver lining to COVID, it's that we now maybe don't need to be in the same location to do some of these things. But some of the ideas, like I said earlier, is guest speakers, if you're possible, offsite visits, specific volunteering opportunities. For example, I'm thinking of Edinburgh Science, who run the Science Festival and Careers Hive in Edinburgh. They will have volunteers come and take part in the activities with the young people. Using platforms to engage and invite industry. So there's a load in the guidelines, but Marketplace by SDS, DYW, Digital World, Smart STEMs, Tech She Can, Scotland is, CERC with their STEM Ambassadors program, Unified Schools program, Founders for Schools, Speakers for Schools. These are all platforms that you can use. Young Engineers and Science Clubs have a lot of fantastic partners that support them. So if you are working with them on any of their programs, they might be able to help you get some industry volunteers. But anything like that is what you would want to put into this question. So Thomas, what do Young Engineers and Science Club, or what do you because I know, before Young Engineers Science Clubs, you were at Aberdeen Science Centre as well. What have you done to get industry involved, or to even just to get context to the skills that your programs are teaching?
So I think it's having a clear offer for the volunteer or the partner. A clear ask is always really, really useful. What specifically is it you want from that volunteer? How much time is it going to take? Where is it going to take place? And that, you can give them loads of options. So we're pretty flexible. So we encourage, direct face-to-face visits, careers videos, mentoring calls. We get the volunteers to sort of feed into the content of our programs and projects. So kind of any format, but just make sure you're clear with the ask, and then just cast a really wide net. There's so many companies out there, so many different they're all looking for stuff to do. All these companies are they've all got hours to volunteer. They're all looking to do more stuff with schools and kids. They're just they've just got a bit of a way to go. So they'll be desperate to engage. We're working with a school that reached out on Twitter. The school reached out to a Scottish cabinet minister, so it's not quite an industry member, but they just pestered them on Twitter, and now they've arranged a visit from a government cabinet minister to the school. That we're now going along with them as well. So with Twitter, just reach out to these people, reach out to companies, or across any social media. But yeah, so many DYW will be a great. All the resources you like, just reach out, say what you're looking for, and just cast as wide a net as you can.
Yeah, don't underestimate your parent body as well. You know, if you might have
Absolutely,
individuals right in your community that you're not aware of. Again, that's maybe more of a school thing, but yeah, absolutely. And as I always say, you know, my job is to approach companies and ask for money, let alone time. So, you know, I've grown a bit of a thick skin, but honestly, the worst they can say is no. It's like, okay, well, it's their loss, genuinely. So, you know, and again, certain parts of the country might not have as many opportunities around, but Thomas, that's a great idea. Social media. You know, we have had rural schools in Angus. I'm thinking of particularly last year, they had someone from the space industry, someone from cybersecurity, from someone from games development, and someone from Amazon all speak over a span of a year. And as Thomas said, you know, you really want to try and, because they're busy, you really want to try and be clear on the ask and the timing and what's required. But for the most part, they are keen to get involved. The word engagement there, engaging industry, also, before I move on, just reminded me that for the other question around engagement, how are you going to get young people involved and keep them involved? There's another program that's run by CERC that I forgot to mention that Maha and I are big fans of. Again, just our opinion, but if you're not already part of it or you're not familiar with it, you may want to check it out. It's called Young STEM Leader. And basically, one of the strategies is to get young people to be STEM leaders within their school or their community, and to help other peers, or whether that's the same age or younger, to get engaged with STEM. But it also gives them recognition for their time and effort. It's something that they can help to build their CV as well. And it could be between sort of the secondary school and the primary schools in the cluster, or it could be sort of some of the P6s and 7s, helping some of the younger years. And I say 6s and 7s on purpose, because obviously when the 7s move up, you want the 6s to then sort of step up to become maybe the senior leaders, and get some of the P5s to become the new leaders when they hit P6. So that's a common model that we see with a lot of grant recipients, and it's really effective. And like I say, it gives them the opportunity to get credited for their work. So I'd love to chat more about that question, because it honestly is one of my favorite questions, but I'm aware of the time. So evaluation, most people think of surveys. It can be. I've seen some other very unique ways to gather feedback. Emoji responses. So put 4 emojis up and ask them which emoji they are after they've done a particular activity. Working as a group to create a word cloud about the activity or the club. Asking them to name as many skills or as many careers or as many types of tech or whatever, and maybe doing that pre and post, and comparing to see how much more they can hopefully say at the end of the activity. I think the ideal situation for Digital Xtra Fund is to do anything that you're doing pre and post, so that you can see a comparison, so that you can measure any improvement. And again, if you're doing multiple cohorts over a year, you might need to run that at the pre and post of each cohort, for example. And then, like I said, there is a midpoint and a final evaluation. And some of your funding is dependent on those evaluations, not in so much as if you do if you get, you know, a bad evaluation from your people that you are delivering to, you won't get the money, but just you need to do an evaluation to get the money. So you get 60% upfront when the grant is awarded, and ideally that is before Christmas, excuse me, before summer. If you don't do the paperwork, then it might be just after summer, but it's in that sort of start of the project period. The next payment is 30%. That is at or just after Christmas. Again, if you need to submit your midpoint evaluation, you get that 30%, and the last 10% is upon receipt of your final evaluation. So in addition to obviously being aware of that, you need to be aware of how that might impact your cash flow. So if you are buying stuff and you don't have any reserves to buy everything up front, you might only be able to buy 60% of what you need up front, which means you might need to buy the next chunk in January, which means that you want to make sure you don't put anything in your project plan for November that you might not be purchasing till January, for example. So you just want to make sure that you are aware of how that payment plan affects your cash flow. And again, that's all in the guidelines. So if you're not sure exactly what I just said, check out the guidelines or reach out to Maha and I, and we can chat more about that. I'm aware of the time. There's only a few minutes left. So I'm going to jump to sustainability. And really, this is, we are funding a project between the 1st of July and the 30th of June 2024, or any period therein. It doesn't have to obviously be delivered during that whole period, but it has to be delivered within that period. But ideally, we want the projects that we support to continue beyond that period. Again, going back to that 0 to 4 question, the obvious answer to this is we've got the kit and Jane Smith has the training, so she's going to deliver it year after year. If I'm honest with you, that's a 2, because something might happen to Jane. She might move on. She might get busy. She might get sick of it. The kit might break. So while it's sustainable in the short term, it's probably not sustainable in the long term. If you want to think about this in terms of long term, you want to think of potential future funding to either upgrade the equipment or repair it. You want to think of, is the venue available long term? Obviously, if you're a school, it probably is, but if you're not a school, maybe it's not. You want to look at training and upskilling your colleagues. Maybe you want to look at working as a cluster to get other schools involved. Maybe you definitely want to have senior leadership team support, whether that's senior leadership team at a school or your organization. Definitely the most successful projects that we see have support from the senior leadership team. You want to know who will manage the equipment and the program moving forward, and ideally maybe, like I say, not have it all reliant on one person. The main reason that Maha and I see projects not continue is because they are one person doing it all, and that person gets tired, moves on, gets sick, gets transferred, retires, and there's no one there to pick up on it. That is the #1 reason why a project, and there's not many, but that's the #1 why a project maybe not continue. And if you are going to look at evolve and expand, Maha and I had a really good conversation with someone the other day about creating a lending library. A lending library is not something that we would fund because we fund specific activities. But if the equipment that is used for the specific activity is then wants to be developed into a lending library, for example, then that is something that you will need to think about how you might achieve that. So I'm aware of the time. Like I say, it's 8 o'clock. So if you need to go, thank you very much for coming today. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you found this useful. If you do have any questions, though, and you want to stay on, I'm happy to stay here for the next little while and answer any questions that might come up.
I'm just going to jump in there as well and just say, as a grant applicant and recipient for a couple of years, it's been great working with Matt and Kraig. They are very, very helpful, and if we can make it through COVID and change things and tweak things, then we can make it through a normal school year. But yeah, just really recommend anyone to apply.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Thomas. Sorry, Kraig, just to quickly go through the save and continue button, which if you want to show that, or just maybe quickly.
Yeah, sorry, I could share. There is a button at the bottom that Maha mentioned there called Save and Continue Later. It will allow you to enter your email address. Please make sure it's correct. Otherwise, you might be a bit scuppered. And it will email you a link to pick up on your application at the last page that you completed by clicking next. So it does give you the link on the page when you click Save and Continue as well. So you might want to copy and paste that somewhere safe, just until you make sure that you get that email address with that link, and it will save it for 30 days.
And it might end up in your spam or junk folder, so maybe make sure that you check that folder. I usually copy the link and keep it safe somewhere so that it's there. So when I was trialing and testing the form, so yeah, I tend to do that. So maybe that's something you could do as well. So I think that's everything. I can't see any questions.
No, a lot of thank yous, which is very much appreciated.
Yeah, feel free to email us at info@digitalxtrafund.scot, and we will be happy to answer to any of your queries and questions. So the deadline is the 6th of April, so make sure you get it before that, earlier the better. But yeah, if you have any queries, we will be attending. We will keep an eye on the email and get back to you as soon as possible. So thank you so much, and thank you, Thomas, for joining us today and giving the insights about your project. So thanks for that, and thanks everyone else for joining.